Okay, welcome and thanks for stopping by. And yes, let's take another deep delve into the mind of Arthur Hayes, a controversial figure, but a important figure in the history of crypto. And he is, yeah, serves us well by sharing his insights into this space. So let's not dilly any longer. Let's just go right into it. And the title of this blog is Surf No More. And I believe he's not talking about big wave surfing. He's talking about servitude and being a serf in a feudal system, I imagine. Have not read this. I'm reading this live. So here we go. The greatest nation states and civilizations efficiently use energy to create economic prosperity for their subjects. I like the way you use subjects in terms of the monarchy, right? Up until recently, energy meant human labor. The state constructs a system where labor is provided and an economic energy surplus is created. There are various ways in which the great societies of past and present paid, in quotation marks, for labor. In the pre-industrial revolution, Rome captured slaves from conquest. America, transatlantic African slavery. Pre-industrial Western Europe, feudal serfs, right? And in the post-industrial revolution, and this is important because crypto could be the fourth turning, right? The fourth industrial revolution. So this is important to know the history of economics and nation states. So post-industrial revolution, most societies moved away from implicit or explicit slavery towards a system where the wages of labor were not allowed to grow at the same rate as the overall economy. This is huge. This is very important what you just said here. The wages of labor were not allowed to grow at the same rate as the overall economy. Suppressed, right? That is a long-winded way of saying savers are financially repressed. Workers saved at a depressed rate. And the difference allows a country to direct national savings towards heavy industrialization. So that's the profit margin, right? Modern China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan are excellent recent examples of post-World War II nations that quickly industrialized using the savings of their laborers. I will post this chart of the China 10-year government bond yield versus real GDP growth. These negative rates have allowed China to internally finance the creation of the industrial behemoth that supplies most of the world's stuff. Can we see? But it looks like minus 4% here, minus 15 here. Wow. So this is the difference that allows the growth of the infrastructure, right? Countries which share greater trade. I actually posted this chart on Twitter the other day. Countries which share greater trade with United States. So this is year 2000. See, most of the world is trading with the US, right? Europe, North America, South America, much of Africa, Australia, India, Japan, etc. And China is kind of an internal market. And I believe this is just post entering the World Trade Organization, WTO, right? So bits and pieces of Africa and neighboring countries, right? It's a very small market China was trading with. And let's fast forward to 2020. And here we go. It's complete domination, apart from UK, France, Italy, and North America, including Mexico, right? Essentially, the takeover. So this was a key market that still was to be toppled, right? The image above is courtesy of The Economist. It is absolutely shocking and amazing what China accomplished over the last 20 years. In 2001, China joined a WTO, World Trade Organization, which meant by international law, it became much harder to slap protective tariffs on goods it produced. American seeking corporations proceeded to ship as much production to China at a cheaper cost as it could. In the process, corporate America reaped an increase in profits margins. As a result, manufacturing jobs moved from west over here to east. Beijing read the industrialization textbook and executed perfectly. The computer and internet connected devices power the current industrial revolution. The exponential changes to human civilization are about to get real in capital letters. AI, quantum computing, and networked robots will completely change the meaning of labor. What are the 7 billion of us good for compared to a robot? Not much, right? A robot that thinks in ways our linear brains cannot comprehend, a robot that does not get sick, a robot that does not unionize, right? A robot that follows instructions perfectly. Yeah, I was a poor employee in terms of following the rules and instructions. Kind of wanted to go my own way, and that's why I kind of ended up in crypto. So here we go. Every other economic revolution hoisted upon human civilization empowered more people than it disenfranchised. Okay, this is key, right? That is why we can support 7 billion people on this planet. But faced with a completely different sort of change, is it prudent to believe that 7 billion people will have a role in this new society that will emerge in the coming decades? Question mark, right? And part of this lockdown is kind of training us to not be, on this merry-go-round to and from work, etc. So I think it was a shock to most people when we were forced to stay locked down. But I'm sensing that now people do not want to go back to the workplace, right? Could be wrong, but I believe that's to be true. So the rich nations have, by definition, a surplus of capital. This capital may be taxed in such a way to provide for a basic income for those left behind. But there is a slice of the world which some call the global south that provides essential cheap labor to rich nations doing agricultural, construction, and domestic services at very, very low relative wages, like house building, picking fruit, etc. Right? In America, the Central and South American immigrants come to do the back-breaking agricultural labor, staff, meat, packing plants in arduous conditions, and also clean toilets and change nappies. In Western Europe, you have the Maghreb and Eastern Europe that fills this gap. Polish plumber meme, anyone? That is true. In Asia, it's poor Asian nations, Southeast Asia, like Philippines and Cambodia, etc. Like the Philippines, who do the same job, right? Let's look at this meme. My Polish plumber has gone back and my tap is leaking. Brace yourselves for Brexiters. Yes, there's been a huge outflow of foreign workers in the UK who've gone back to whence they came, unfortunately. Huge part of the workplace, right, gone. They may come back. We shall see. Immigration always creates tension. The locals perceive the immigrants as taking their jobs and benefits, but these locals would rather wear a collar or pencil skirt and work in a climate-controlled office than on a field or in the kitchen, obviously, right? The unfortunate reality is that many nations in the global south lack domestic, inclusive institutions to channel the remittance income from their citizens working abroad in these richer countries towards accumulating the capital necessary to fully participate in this current industrial revolution, right? There's a whole group of people that will be left behind again. These nations often possess some range of natural resources, but all too often they extract and export primary inputs and import finished products. Because of the cost, are capital starved and must get loans from Western policy banks, such as the World Bank and IMF, right? Which certainly increases the cost load of that debt as they have to repay back in dollars, right? So that their local currency always is on a quicker destructive path, right? So sad. The truly sad part for these nations is that aid is predicated on the continuation of an economic system in which domestic manufacturing capability is stunted, because market access must be given on equal terms to all first world companies. That's why Nike sets up sweatshops, right? So you can't compete with that. No successful empire or nation state ever practiced free trade while they were themselves industrializing. Free trade is only beneficial when your companies can offer cheaper goods and services than others. Free trade is then the condition for foreign aid loans. Free trade in a position of weakness guarantees a nation will always remain weak. The current spat between America and China illustrates this point very clearly. Each side wants unfettered access to the other's domestic market. Each side wants the ability for its capital to purchase the other's most innovative companies, right? And each side blocks outright control of strategic industries. Poor nations cannot negotiate on the same terms, and therefore rarely get into the position where they have national champions worthy of acquisition. As an aside, consider the current China big tech crackdown. Beijing allowed these massive homegrown platforms to grow quickly because American firms were denied entry, right? The Great Firewall to the market. And then when these upstarts got a bit too big for their Mao suits, Beijing stepped in and clearly demonstrated who was top dog. Give unto Caesar unto what is Caesar's, right? Alibaba, Jack Ma, if you ever followed that story, it was a case in point. Western investors have been licking their wounds from the resulting stock market losses and crying foul. What about property rights? That's a little rich coming from a coterie of investors who cheered the US Federal Reserve when it nationalized investment grade corporate credit on 23rd March 2021. Yeah, is that what they did, eh? Wow. A little government intervention ain't hurt nobody as long as it helps the home team. Yeah, kind of, you know how it goes. Turning back to the topic at hand, to understand the impact that lopsided trade has on developing nations, just look at El Salvador. My research assistant dug into the El Salvadorian economy and had this to say about the country's current situation. In brief, El Salvador was hit very hard by the pandemic and has subsequently rolled out extensive government programs to offset the human and economic fallout. El Salvador is in a precarious financial position with sizable public debt, few options for financing projects, and a negative account deficit. It will need to successfully negotiate aid with the IMF to keep its recovery on track. So the question becomes, how can developing nations like El Salvador change the game in their favor and break free of their financial woes? The time is to act now. Continuing to shackle one's country to a global financial system that perpetuates a lack of domestic capital accumulation is a recipe for a dystopian nightmare for the global south. In El Salvador's case, they looked at their options and made a game-changing decision to use Bitcoin as legal tender. Sadly, this is in quotations, parentheses, sadly when they reached out to the World Bank for help in implementing Bitcoin as legal tender, the World Bank told them no thanks. Wow. Stepping outside the traditional financial system is simply not tolerated, and it is not unreasonable to predict that the IMF could make a precondition to new debt financing the abandonment of the usage of Bitcoin as legal tender. But I digress. This is great news, but El Salvador has committed only to adopting Bitcoin itself as a legal form of currency, which may potentially fall short in enacting the level of change they are looking for. The purpose of this essay is to reimagine the El Salvadorian economy. If they were to create a new Bitcoin-backed currency, which would likely be more helpful in turning their situation around, can it be credibly done? And how can this help solve some of El Salvador's problems? Nations like El Salvador must race against the progress of technology. Their cheap labor is only cheap relative to other humans, but compared to robots, yeah, not so much. Selfishly, I want to explore how a real, vibrant, and large Bitcoin-pegged fixed income market can mature. I believe that a sovereign borrower like El Salvador could shine a guiding light for many other similarly situated nations. The Bitcoin standard, current conditions. El Salvador is currently a dollarized economy. The US dollar is the only major accepted form of currency. Bitcoin used as legal tender is a recent phenomenon. The sole use of the USD subjugates El Salvador completely to the monetary policy decisions of the US Fed. Good or bad, El Salvador suffers the consequences of Fed policy. The Fed has domestic priorities that doesn't include the well-being of any country that chooses to fully dollarize. This can and does cause issues where the macroeconomic situation of a foreign country does not require the same policies as that of the United States. Creating the peg. The El Salvadorian colon, which was replaced by the USD as El Salvador's national currency in 2001, should have new importance in this regime. The central bank should issue a new set of Salvadorian colons. We call them NSCs, depending on the amount of Bitcoin each NSC represents. Creating a peg is easy. Defending it is another matter. The central bank must find a way to purchase enough Bitcoin to back its currency. The amount of currency in circulation should match the economic realities. The central bank can drive the NSC to appreciate and depreciate by increasing or reducing the Bitcoin exchange rate, respectively. Interesting. Let's walk through an example. So instead of a gold-backed currency, a partially backed Bitcoin currency. Here we go. El Salvador decrees that each Salvadorian NSC will be exchangeable for 0.01 Bitcoin, which is roughly around $41,000. No, $410. Yeah, 0.001. The amount of NSCs in circulation will depend on how many Bitcoin the central bank holds. Assuming the CB holds 10,000 Bitcoin, that translates into a money supply of 1 million NSCs. How to get Bitcoin? This is the biggest problem. How does El Salvador obtain enough Bitcoin to credibly back its currency? If El Salvador goes down this path, the transition could be gradual. And step one, the central bank should announce the future intended Bitcoin NSC exchange rate. It is in the future because currently the central bank does not have enough Bitcoin to back its number of NSCs. It will issue an official peg. However, the NSC will replace Bitcoin and the USD as legal tender. As a first course of business, the central bank can convert all of its financial assets and foreign currency into Bitcoin at the prevailing exchange rate. It should then decree that all taxes and government levies should be paid in NSCs. Even if a shop wishes to price its good in dollars, it must exchange some dollar income for NSC at the official Bitcoin NSC peg in order to pay its taxes. The only way to create NSCs is to tender Bitcoin for NSC at the official peg. So as not to attract price gouging FX changes, the central bank should stand ready to exchange USD for Bitcoin at the global average with minimal transaction fees. Any large international crypto spot exchange would welcome the central bank as a client. And given the game-changing nature of this program, I would bet that the central bank could negotiate a very favorable fee schedule. Another scenario: local shop owner sells goods worth $100,000 and owes 100 NSC of taxes, but they receive their income in USD, not NSC. So one NSC equals 0.01 Bitcoin, and one Bitcoin equals $10,000. Therefore, the shop owners needs to obtain one BTC in order to create 100 NSCs through the central bank. The shop owner exchanges $10,000 with the central bank to acquire one Bitcoin, and then creates the 100 NSCs through the central bank with one Bitcoin. The shop owner then remits 100 NSCs to the central government in order to pay their taxes. The central bank's balance sheet looks like this: one Bitcoin of assets from the shop owner, 100 NSC liability by issuing the 100 NSC notes to the shop owner. Issue: if the central bank issues 1 million NSCs but does not have 10,000 Bitcoin of assets, should an NSC holder attempt to redeem NSC into Bitcoin, the central bank cannot stand by the peg. In the initial transition period, the central bank should only allow creations and not redemptions. So the window is one way. If they allowed redemptions, it would be as if the central bank issued an unbacked fiat currency at the start, because they would not have enough Bitcoin to beat the official peg. However, if everyone in El Salvador is forced to use the NSC to pay taxes, there will be a natural price insensitive demand. The central bank should allow the free market to function, and until the balance sheet contains enough Bitcoin to match the peg, third parties must be allowed to price the unofficial exchange rate. That means if someone would like to convert the NSC into USD or Bitcoin, these FX traders will buy NSC and remit whatever amount of USD or Bitcoin the secondary market prescribes. At some point, the secondary market rate will appreciate to that artificial peg, and more economic activity pays taxes in NSC. The central bank cannot allow any individual or organization to redeem NSCs at anything other than the official peg. Otherwise, there's an arbitrage opportunity and that arbitrage opportunity essentially robs the central government of funds. Okay, let's go on with this article a little bit more. Step 3. Ooh, this is where it gets the tingles. El Salvador can issue sovereign bonds denominated in NSC to meet its capital account deficit. The country imports more goods than it exports. Therefore, it owes the global market money that it doesn't have. The country still needs foreign funds to balance its books. The crypto community should stand behind the nation as it attempts to become sovereign once more. An NSC bond, which will essentially be a Bitcoin bond, could be issued at the rate or the market deems was reasonable for El Salvador to finance its capital account deficit. Something about the Bitcoin bond. This has been kind of talked about for a few years, and I think it's gonna be in the Bitcoin's future in the next 5 years. I reckon in 5 years we will see a Bitcoin bond by a sovereign nation. So it's very exciting times ahead. Okay, let's read this. If there wasn't a crypto ego complex involved in pricing the debt, the government would not be able to issue a bond at a lower interest rate than a USD bond. However, I believe the crypto community would like to show the world it can be done, and we support our own We try to. Yeah, everyone's got the clicks, right? Investors set out of pride and ideology would accept a lower interest rate than on a USD bond. Okay. El Salvador made a bold first step to formally recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. Now they must follow through. Half-arsing it will not do the country no justice. And unfortunately, the clock is ticking towards a future where their low-value manufacturing and domestic labor exports are replaced by more energy-efficient robots. Yeah, this is the future, right? So they got to race against time. A good chunk of the world is in a similar situation vis-a-vis their position on the side of capital versus labor. Labor is going through a renaissance right now due to COVID disruptions, but robots are about to get woke, and they are coming for everyone's jobs. El Salvador taking back control of its finances is only the first step. By removing the tentacles of traditional finance, they are giving themselves a fighting chance. But the hard part comes when the political institutions must use the savings and efficiencies gained not to line their own pockets. Wow, this is key, right? But to upskill their constituents and create greater prosperity for all. Yeah, so I'm big. I'm really big on like looking out for these smaller nations. I believe they've been exploited for far too long by too many of the older powers that be. So exploitation cannot continue in the 21st century. So I'm hoping technology, crypto, will basically give a solution, give a way out. It's their plan B, right? And it doesn't have to be Bitcoin, right? It doesn't have to be Bitcoin, but at the moment, it's likely to be Bitcoin for Bitcoin bonds, etc., and that will lead the way to other cryptos. So yeah, I'm very excited about what is transpiring. So good on El Salvador. It's only been a few months, but like Arthur says, you can't half-ass it. You got to go all in sometimes. And I think their prime minister or president kind of has the attitude of why not? He kind of, I think he's woke enough to realize, even though he's quite young himself, to really like bet big. So bet big on Bitcoin, bet big on crypto, bet big on technology to remove the tentacles of traditional finance, right? So yeah, good stuff from Arthur. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and look forward to the next one.